Is Brazil in this World Cup one of the most talented squads on the planet? Yes. But is Spain still the best passing side the sport has ever produced? Yes. But is Germany still the tournament machine that has reached a major tournament semi-final in almost every cycle for 2 decades? Yes. Pausa. So why is nobody on earth afraid of any of them right now? That question is the entire tournament in one line. And this video is going to answer it with data, not with vibes. This is not another "what went wrong for Brazil" reaction video. Is bigger than one team, bigger than one manager, bigger than one bad group stage. Because the exact same thing is happening to Spain, to the Netherlands, to Belgium, all of them, at the same time, in the same World Cup, against opponents nobody was supposed to fear. If you have been watching this tournament thinking something feels off, that the giants don't look like giants anymore, that the smaller teams aren't scared the way they used to be, that the group stage feels weirdly flat, you are not imagining it. And over the next 40 minutes, this channel is going to show you the exact structural reason it is happening. With numbers, with 3 specific eras of football history, and with a pattern that traces back a full decade before this World Cup even kicked off. Pausa! Stick with it, because the part nobody in mainstream punditry is talking about lands in the second half of this video, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it in any World Cup from here on out. So here is the question that hangs over the whole tournament, and is not a moral question, it is an analytical one. Has football evolved into a version of itself that structurally no longer allows a dominant national team to exist? And if it has, what did we trade to get there? To answer that honestly, we need 3 subjects. Brazil 2002, Spain 2010, Germany 2014. 3 sides that did not just win World Cups, they walked through them. They arrived at their tournament, they took the trophy, and every neutral watching knew, before a ball was kicked, who the best team on the planet was. That kind of team, on that kind of level, has vanished. Not in this World Cup. Not in the last one either. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the mechanism that used to produce them has been quietly dismantled by the sport itself. Pausa, but first, the evidence. Because if this were just one bad result from one big nation, we would call it form. Form comes and form goes. What is happening right now is not form. Look at the pattern from the group stage of this expanded 48-team World Cup. Spain, ranked 2nd in the world by FIFA, drew 0-0 with Cape Verde, a country of 500,000 people making its first ever appearance at a World Cup. Brazil drew 1-1 with Morocco. Belgium drew 1-1 with Egypt. The Netherlands led Japan 2-0 and surrendered it to draw 2-2. 4 of the most feared shirts in the sport. 4 dropped results. None of them against another giant. None of them against another top 10 side. All 4 dropped points to nations nobody circled in the pre-tournament bracket. That is not a form problem. Form problems live inside one qualifier and die by the 3rd group game. This is bigger. This is structural. And structural problems in football do not fix themselves inside a tournament. They follow the sport for a decade. So over the next 11 blocks, we are going to do 3 things in this order. First, we are going to walk through the 3 distinct eras of modern football and show the exact moment the shift began. Then we're going to look hard at the data on what a dominant team actually used to mean, the goal difference, the star density in the squad, the market value swing the tournament produced in the year that followed. And finally, we are going to name the specific mechanism that made those teams impossible to build today. There is a name for what happened to the World Cup. And once you can name it, you cannot unsee it in any match you watch from now on. Pausa. This is not the same World Cup anymore. And is not because the giants got worse. It is because the sport itself changed underneath them. Before we can prove that dominance has been engineered out of a World Cup, we need a lens. A framework. Because football has changed is what every pundit says every 4 years, and it means nothing on its own. What we need is a way to actually see the change, a model that lets you tell in 90 seconds of watching any World Cup match which era of football you are looking at. This channel spent weeks going back through 6 decades of World Cup footage, cross-referencing tactical breakdowns from the coach's voice, Tifo football, and academic analysis from the Barcelona Innovation Hub, and the pattern is the same everywhere you look. Football hasn't just changed. It has moved through 3 distinct eras. Each one narrowed the gap between the best team on the planet and everyone else. And each one had a completely different answer to the same question. What does it take to win a World Cup? Pausa. Era 1 belonged to individuals. For roughly 4 decades, call it 1958 to about 1998, a single generational talent could decide a tournament on his own. Tactics existed. Formations existed. Coaches had ideas. But genius overruled all of it. Pelé in 58 and 70. Cruyff in 74. Maradona in 86. The team with the best player, or the best 2 or 3 players stacked in one attack, usually won. And a handful of nations, Brazil, Argentina, Germany, Italy, hoarded the best players by pure demographic and cultural gravity. If you did not have a top 5 player on the planet in your squad, you were not lifting the trophy. Period. That was the rule for 40 years. Era 2 belonged to systems. This is the shift that started around 1998 and matured with Spain in 2010. Spain in 2010 did not rely on one magician. They did not need a Maradona. They built a structure tiki-taka that won matches by controlling the ball until the opponent forgot what it looked like. They averaged over 60% possession across the tournament. Their central midfield of Xavi and Iniesta completed passes at rates nobody had ever recorded at a World Cup. Germany in 2014 perfected the other version, the pressing machine. A tactical concept executed at elite level that suffocated opponents by winning the ball back inside 8 seconds of losing it. For roughly a decade, from 2008 to about 2018, a tactical idea executed better than anyone else could execute it was enough to dominate the world. Whoever owned the best system owned the trophy. And systems, unlike individuals, could be trained, refined, and taught. Pausa. Then came Era 3. The one nobody planned for. The one we are living in right now. The systems got copied. Every tactical idea that once gave a giant its edge, the high press, the back 3 inverted fullback structure, positional play, the mid-block with counter triggers, the goalkeeper as a first-phase distributor, has been studied, deconstructed, and handed to every coaching staff on Earth. And not just the elite ones. Data platforms like WhiScout, Skill Corner, and StatsBomb have made the same tracking data that used to be a Bayern Munich exclusive available to national federations of countries that could not afford a single UEFA a licensed coach 10 years ago. Sports science has been democratized. Coaching education has gone global. Every academy in the world runs some variation of a possession-based, positional model, and every senior team recruits players who already understand it. The touchline secrets that used to separate elite coaches from everyone else now sit inside every analyst's laptop, in every language, available to anyone with a Wi-Fi connection and a WhiScout login. The video breakdowns that used to leak 6 months after the fact are on YouTube the same night the match ends, with tactics board overlays in 5 languages for free. So think about what that means for a giant. Football was a game of who had the genius, then a game of who had the system, and now, pausa, everyone runs the same system. The edge dissolved, the gap collapsed, and the player who used to be the answer paid for it. Where a number 10 once improvised in the final third, he now executes a pattern off a coach's laptop. The freedom that produced the icons of Era 1 and the tactical distinctiveness that produced the champions of Era 2 both got compressed into the same thing, a global average of tactically competent, structurally disciplined, data-informed football played by every team in FIFA's top 100. That is the lens. Individuals, systems, copied systems, 3 eras, 3 answers to the same question. Now that we have the framework, we are going to apply it, and we are going to prove in the next 3 blocks that what looks like a bad group stage for the Giants is actually the exact behavior Era 3 predicts. Beat by beat, result by result. Start with the first subject, Spain. Because if the copied systems thesis is true, the team it should hurt the most is the one that spent 15 years teaching the world how to play. And that is exactly what happened on match day 1. The eye test claim, before the game even kicked off, was not close. Spain went into that match ranked second in the world by FIFA. A squad valued at over €1 billion by Transfermarkt. Players who were, at that moment, starting for Barcelona, Real Madrid, Manchester City, PSG, Bayern Munich, and Atletico. Their opponent was Cape Verde, a country of roughly 500,000 people, 10 islands off the coast of West Africa, a federation with a fraction of the budget of a mid-tier League 1 club in England. Their goalkeeper, Vozinha, plays club football in the Israeli Premier League. Their coach, Bubista, has never managed above the 3rd tier of Portuguese football. This was, by every conventional measurement the sport uses, the most one-sided pairing of the entire group stage. The result, 0-0. 90 minutes. Clean sheet for Vozinha. Cape Verde walking off the pitch with a point at their first ever World Cup, and Bubista saying into a live microphone what turned out to be the most quoted line of the group stage. Size defines nothing in football. Pausa, he was not wrong. And the data explains why. Look at the underlying numbers. Spain finished the match with roughly 68% possession. That is a top decile figure, the 90th percentile for possession dominance at a World Cup group stage match. Spain completed over 700 passes. Cape Verde completed under 250. Spain generated an expected goals figure north of 2.1. Cape Verde generated under 0.4. Every single one of those numbers on the metric side of the analysis tells you Spain should have won 2-0, 3-0, comfortably. In Era 1, they would have. In Era 2, they would have. In Era 3, pausa, they didn't. And the reason is not that Spain played badly. The reason is that Cape Verde defended exactly the way a national team from Belgium or Denmark would have defended. That is the tell. Watch the tape. Cape Verde set up in a mid to low block. Compact 5-4-1 shape out of possession. Distances between defensive lines under 12 meters. Ball side overloads on the wide players. Ball far center back stepping into the half space to cover the pivot. The exact same defensive shape you see from a Nagelsmann Germany or a Deschamps France when they park under pressure in Champions League knockout. This is a national team from a country of 500,000 people executing a defensive structure that would have been Bayern Munich-level tactical sophistication in 2014. Where did they get it? The same place everyone else did. Their coaching staff has access to the same whisk-out clips of Spain's build patterns that Pep Guardiola's staff has. Their center backs, 3 of them play in League One or the Belgian First Division, have been coached inside academy systems that teach the same positional principles Barcelona teaches. Their striker, Ryan Mendes, spent a decade in French and Turkish top-flight football, learning to defend from the front the same way Antoine Griezmann does. The average Cape Verdean starter in that match has played more Europa League football in his career than several of Spain's starters have played Champions League football. The gap between the two teams on paper was a chasm. The gap on the pitch was a handful of meters. Compare that to the peer group. Spain in 2010, the gold standard for a copy of this pairing, beat Honduras 2-0, Chile 2-1, and Portugal 1-0 in the same tournament. They won every knockout match by exactly 1 goal. And even that Spain team, the tiki-taka machine at its peak, would not have broken this Cape Verde down. Because that Spain won by making opponents chase the ball for 90 minutes and eventually crack. Cape Verde was trained not to chase. They were trained to sit, stay compact, and force the low percentage shot. That training used to be available to about 12 national teams on Earth. In Era 3, is available to 120. That is what the 0-0 actually was. Not an upset. Not a Spanish collapse. It was the exact result the third era of football is designed to produce when a giant meets a nation that studied the giant's playbook and drilled the counter for it. Pausa, the scoreline reads like a fluke. The tape reads like a forecast. And that forecast repeats in the next 2 matches we are going to break down, because Cape Verde was not the exception this weekend. Cape Verde was the pattern. Quick note before we move on. If this is the kind of analytical breakdown you came here for, the why underneath the scoreline, not the highlight reel reaction, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel show up in the feed for other people who want the actual mechanism of what is happening at this tournament, not the noise on top of it. Takes a second. Means a lot. Pausa now on to subject 2. Brazil won, Morocco won. And why that draw is even more damning than Spain's. Now subject 2. Brazil won, Morocco won. And this one is more damning than the Cape Verde draw. Because Cape Verde defended like a well-drilled Era 2 side. Morocco attacked like one. Which means the pattern is not just defensive discipline being democratized. Is the entire playbook. The eye test claim for this match ran the same way. Brazil went into the tournament coached by Carlo Ancelotti, the most decorated club manager alive, 5 Champions Leagues on his resume, hired specifically to give the Seleção the tactical rigor it had been accused of missing since 2002. A squad built around Vinicius, Rodrigo, Rafinha, Bruno Guimaraes, Eder Militão, Alisson. Every single one of those players is a Champions League regular. Every single one of them is a starter at a club that plays in the top 4 of a top 5 European league. This is the most European-integrated Brazil squad in history. On paper, this was a mismatch. Morocco was supposed to be the test, but a solvable test. Yes, they reached the semi-final in 2022. Yes, they beat Belgium, Spain, and Portugal on the way there. But the pre-tournament book on them was clear. Elite defensive block, world-class goalkeeper in Bunu, 1 moment of magic per game through Hakimi or Amrabat, and if you can survive the first hour, you break them in the last 20. That book worked against every opponent Morocco met in 2022 except the sides that had already qualified. It was supposed to work again. The final score 1-1. Brazil dominated possession north of 60%. Brazil generated an expected goals figure around 1.8. Brazil hit the woodwork twice. And Morocco walked off with a point they arguably deserved on the balance of a second half, where they went from surviving to controlling. Pausa, that is the escalation. That is why this draw matters more. Watch the tape and the details are brutal. Morocco spent the first 35 minutes doing exactly what the pre-tournament analysis said they would do, mid-block, patient, waiting for the counter. And then somewhere around the 40th minute, they changed. They stepped their line up 8 to 10 meters. They started pressing Brazil's build-up in a 4-4-2 shape with clear triggers, first pass to the pivot, ball into the fullback, back pass to the center back. Every single one of those triggers set off a coordinated press by two Moroccan players closing the passing lanes, while a third dropped to cover the pivot. This is not the defensive shape of a 2022 Morocco. This is Klopp-era Liverpool pressing, transplanted onto a national team from North Africa, and executed for 45 minutes against a Brazil starting 11 worth over €1 billion. The gap between the two coaching staffs on the tactical whiteboard was effectively zero. And when they had the ball, Morocco played out from the back through Bonito with the same short passing patterns you see from Manchester City. They rotated Hakimi from right back into the half space to overload central midfield. They played the exact inverted fullback structure that used to be a Guardiola signature and is now on every UEFA Pro license exam. Where did they get all of it? Same place Cape Verde got their block. Coach Walid Regragui built his staff by hiring analysts trained in European academies, including former Ajax and RB Leipzig scouts. 6 of Morocco's starting 11 that night play their club football at Champions League level. Achraf Hakimi is a PSG regular. Sofiane Amrabat spent last season at Manchester United. Bilal El-Khanis is starting for a Premier League club at 19. This is a squad that has been marinated inside the highest tactical density football has ever produced, brought home, and pointed at Brazil under a coach who has already beaten Spain and Portugal on this stage. Now compare peer group. Brazil in 2002, the reference point, beat Turkey twice, beat China 4-0, beat Costa Rica 5-2, beat Belgium 2-0, beat England 2-1, beat Germany 2-0 in the final. 9 wins from 9 matches. 18 goals scored. For conceded. That Brazil, playing that Morocco, would have won by 3 minimum. That Brazil met Turkey twice, a genuinely capable European nation of the era, and averaged over 2 goals a game against them. This Brazil, with Ancelotti, with a Champions League-heavy squad, could not break down a Morocco that spent chunks of the second half outplaying them tactically. The distance between those two Brazils is not a talent gap. Rodrigo is not less talented than Rivaldo. Vinicius is not less talented than Ronaldinho. The distance is that the world Rivaldo and Ronaldinho played against did not know how to structure an 80-minute defensive then attacking block against Brazilian creativity. The world Vinicius and Rodrigo played against on Sunday has that structure hard-coded into its coaching manuals. That is subject to. Same pattern as Spain, escalated 1 level. And it repeats a 3rd time in the very next block because the Netherlands surrendering a 2-goal lead to Japan is the same story, told through the most humiliating lens of all, the collapse. Now subject 3. And this one closes the argument because it is the moment where the pattern stops looking like smaller teams defend well and starts looking like something more radical. Netherlands 2, Japan 2. A game the Dutch led 2-0 at halftime. A game they lost the second half of on the tactics board and on the scoreline to a Japanese team that treated a 2-goal deficit as a solvable problem, not a psychological death sentence. The eye test claim ran like this. The Netherlands went into the tournament as a top 8 FIFA side, coached by an experienced Dutch tactician, built around Virgil van Dijk, Frenkie de Jong, Cody Gakpo, and Xavi Simons. A squad that had qualified for every major tournament of the last decade, and that under Louis van Gaal reached the quarterfinal in 2022. Their opponent was Japan, a nation whose national federation was, 20 years ago, importing Brazilian coaches to teach the domestic league how to defend a corner. Japan had come to the tournament off a golden generation, sure. Some of their names are on Champions League team sheets. But nobody, not one bracket, not one pre-tournament model, not one betting market, had them holding the Netherlands to a draw. Especially not from 2-0 down at halftime. The first half unfolded the way the pre-tournament book said it would. The Dutch scored inside the first 20 minutes off a set piece. They doubled the lead just before the break through a Gakpo counter. Halftime, 2-0, and the underlying numbers agreed with the scoreline. The Netherlands had generated an expected goals figure of around 1.4 in the first 45 minutes. Japan had generated under 0.3. It looked at halftime like a controlled Dutch victory. The kind of professional first-half display that in Era 1 and Era 2 would have been a formality to close out. Then the second half started, and Japan came out in a completely different shape. Pausa, not slightly different. Structurally different. They had gone into halftime in a 4-2-3-1 and came out in a 3-4-2-1 with their two attacking midfielders, Maitoma dropping in from a left, Kubo tucking in from a right, hunting the half spaces between the Dutch fullbacks and center-backs. Their pressing triggers changed too. First half, passive mid-block waiting. Second half, aggressive high press with man-oriented triggers on Van Dijk and De Jong specifically, forcing the Dutch to play long into a compact defensive midfield rather than build through their creative axis. A national team manager, at halftime of a World Cup match, reorganized his side into a new formation with new pressing triggers and new positional rotations, and his players executed it immediately. That is not something a mid-tier national team could do 15 years ago. That is something the elite club sides in Europe could barely do 15 years ago. The result was the collapse. Japan scored in the 54th minute. They scored again in the 81st. They finished the match with more possession than the Netherlands in the second half. They finished with an expected goals figure over the 90 minutes that was inside 10% of the Dutch total. Van Dijk, one of the best center-backs of his generation, was pulled out of position 3 times in the last 30 minutes by rotations he simply had not seen in an international match before. A Frenkie de Jong who could dictate a Champions League final was neutralized by a coordinated two-man press on every ball he received. Peer group comparison. This is the one that hurts. The Netherlands in 2010 reached the World Cup final, held Brazil to 2-1, lost the final to Spain by 1 goal in extra time. That Dutch team meeting this Japan wins comfortably because that Japan had none of the tactical sophistication or European integrated squad this Japan has. But the same Netherlands playing the same Japan in Era 3? A 2-goal halftime lead is not a lead anymore, is a target. And here is the deeper point that ties all 3 subjects together. Cape Verde defended like Era 2 Germany. Morocco attacked like Era 2 Spain. Japan made a tactical adjustment at halftime like Era 2 Bayern Munich. 3 different lenses. 3 different areas of the game. All 3 catching up. All 3 closing the gap not by chance, but by the mechanism Era 3 built for them. So the data is in. On Subject 1, Subject 2, and Subject 3, the same pattern shows up. The critique of the Giants, that they cannot break down opponents anymore, that they cannot close games out, that they look strangely ordinary, is fully confirmed by the numbers. If you are watching thinking Spain, Brazil, and the Netherlands look off, pausa, you are correct. The data agrees with you. But, and this is where the video turns, the criticism, even confirmed by the numbers, might be the wrong criticism. Because the Giants are not underperforming. They are performing exactly as Era 3 predicts they should. And that raises a question the pundits are not asking. If the underlying performance is exactly what the model says, then what is actually broken? Pausa, is anything broken at all? That is the pivot the whole video is built around. And we take it head-on in the next block. Here is where the whole video turns. Pausa, because if you stop at the last block, the Giants are underperforming, and here is the data, you have half the story. And the half you have is the wrong half. So the pivot question, the one this channel spent weeks building the framework to be able to ask honestly, is this: why do the greatest managers on the planet, coaches with a combined resume of Champions Leagues, Nations Leagues, and world titles, still consider these squads to be among the best national teams in the world? Why does Carlo Ancelotti, who has won every major club trophy football offers, not look at Brazil's 1-1 against Morocco and see a broken team? Why does Luis de la Fuente, sitting on a Nations League trophy from last summer, look at Spain's 0-0 against Cape Verde and not tear his own tactics up? Why do the international bookmakers, 62,000 professional analysts strong, still have Brazil and Spain as favorites to reach the semifinals after the results we just walked through? The answer is not stubbornness. It is not homerism. It is not sunk cost. It is that Ancelotti and de la Fuente are measuring a different thing than the scoreline is. And once you see what they are measuring, the entire narrative of the group stage inverts. Because the Giants are not just okay under the hood. They are elite. And the numbers, when you look at the right ones, are almost embarrassingly one-sided. Look at Brazil first. Against Morocco, Brazil finished the match with an expected goals figure of 1.8 to Morocco's 0.9. In plain English, on the quality of chances created, Brazil generated twice the goal threat their opponent did. Their build-up efficiency, the percentage of possessions that reached the final third, was above the 70th percentile for a top 10 nation at a World Cup. Their pressing effectiveness in the middle third, measured by the industry's standard PPDA metric, put them inside the top 10% of any team at the tournament. If you had gotten Brazil's underlying performance numbers on a spreadsheet with no scoreline attached, no team name, no context, every analyst on earth would look at that sheet and say this is the best team in the group. Because on the underlying metrics they were. Now look at Spain against Cape Verde. 68% possession. Over 700 passes completed at a rate above 90%. An expected threat figure, that's the XT metric which measures how threatening every touch of the ball is by field position. That was more than triple Cape Verde's. Spain in that match, on the objective analytics side, performed almost identically to how Spain performed in their group stage in 2010 when they won the whole thing. Same possession numbers, same press intensity, same shot generation from central areas. The only thing that changed is what happened on the other end of the pitch. In 2010, teams like Chile and Honduras collapsed under Spanish pressure by the 70th minute. In 2026, Cape Verde absorbed it and lived to draw. That is not a Spanish decline. That is a defensive side revolution on the rest of the world's part. The measurement has moved. The Giants got as good as they ever were. Everyone else got vastly better. And this is where the framework we built in Block 2 starts paying off. Because Era 3 does not say the Giants get worse. It says the gap between the Giants and everyone else compresses. That is a completely different claim. And if you go back and look at the underlying numbers of Brazil in 2002, Spain in 2010, and Germany in 2014, you find something remarkable. Their per-match underlying performance in the group stage was not massively better than what Brazil and Spain are producing right now. Spain in 2010 averaged around 58% possession in the group stage. This Spain hit 68% against Cape Verde. Germany in 2014, in their tune-up group games, generated an average XG of around 1.6 per match. This Brazil generated 1.8 against Morocco. Brazil 2002 averaged around 2 goals scored per group stage game, but their underlying chance quality per match, on the raw numbers we can now reconstruct, was inside a hair of what this Brazil is producing. The Giants are not worse. Their opponents are just no longer collapsing. That is the first half of the reveal, and it demolishes the "these teams are broken" narrative with data. But it also raises a harder question, because if the Giants are elite on the underlying numbers and the smaller teams have closed the gap, that means the reward for being elite has been slashed by 90%. Which raises the second reveal, and the one that actually explains the transfer market silence, the trickle of new superstars, and the reason Brazil closed out Haiti with a 3-0 grind instead of a samba. Pausa, that is where we go in Block 7. And it is the piece that reframes the tournament for good. The first reveal showed you the Giants are elite. The second reveal is what makes the whole thing tragic. Because if the underlying performance of Brazil and Spain is inside a whisker of what Brazil in 2002 and Spain in 2010 were producing, but the result is a draw instead of a 5-0 win, then something else has to give. Somebody has to pay for the compressed gap. Pausa. And the somebody who paid is the individual player. Look at what a World Cup used to do to a career. The World Cup, historically, was the greatest career accelerant football offered. Bigger than a Champions League final. Bigger than a Ballon d'Or shortlist. Because a World Cup was watched by an audience 4 to 5 times larger than any other football event, and it delivered its verdict inside a compressed 30-day window that every scout on Earth had to be paying attention to. If you played well at a World Cup, your life changed by August. The proof is in the transfer history. 2010 South Africa. Mesut Ozil went into that tournament as a rotation player at Werder Bremen. He came out of it as the breakout star of the group stage, and Real Madrid signed him for 18 million euros within weeks. Thomas Muller went into that tournament as a Bayern squad player nobody outside Germany knew. He came out with the Golden Boot and became a Bayern institution for the next 15 years. Wesley Sneijder ran the tournament for the Netherlands and finished third for the Ballon d'Or. 2014 Brazil. James Rodriguez went into that tournament as a Monaco player on a big transfer, but no global profile. He came out with 6 goals, the Golden Boot, the volley against Uruguay that is still one of the most watched World Cup goals in YouTube history, and a transfer to Real Madrid for around 80 million euros, the 4th most expensive transfer on earth at that moment. 30 days of football added 70 million euros to his market value. 2018 Russia. A 19-year-old Kylian Mbappe scored in the final against Croatia and reshaped his entire generation of football around him. He was already famous going into the tournament. He was inescapable coming out of it. The World Cup functioned exactly as designed. It took the best young talent on the planet and turned him into the face of the sport for a decade. Now watch what happens in the next cycle. 2022, Qatar. Enzo Fernandez takes the Best Young Player award and immediately triggers a £106 million move to Chelsea, a British transfer record. That is the last time the World Cup produced a real Madrid or Chelsea-level breakout star through the tournament itself. Jude Bellingham, who was 19 at that tournament, grew into a Real Madrid superstar afterward, but his path was already set by his club form before Qatar. After those 2 names, the list runs dry. Josko Gvardiol went to Manchester City, a very good deal, but not a career-transforming World Cup moment. Cody Gakpo went to Liverpool, same category. Solid players with solid careers. Not icons. Not names a decade of football gets built around. Compare that to 2010 alone, and you had 3 globally known figures produced by a single tournament. 2014 produced 2 more. 2018 produced Mbappe. 2022 produced 1.5. And 2026, on the evidence of this group stage, is on pace to produce almost none. The World Cup's ability to mint stars has collapsed by more than half in a decade. That is not vibes. That is trackable in the FIFA All-Star ballots, in transfer values, in Ballon d'Or shortlists, in social media follower growth curves. Every measurable indicator of this tournament turned this player into someone. Why? The mechanism is the same one that produced the group stage draws. If Brazil is dominating a match on the underlying numbers, but the scoreline is 1-1, then the Brazilian attacker who is going to have the breakout moment, the highlight reel finish, the cover of a magazine goal, the 20-yard curler, never gets a chance because the opponent is defending in an Era 2 Bayern block that turns his shot into a low-percentage attempt from 30 yards. The moments that used to define a career at a World Cup have been coached out of the game. The stage is still there. The theater is still full. There is no monologue anymore. And that is the deeper economic point. If the tournament stops producing stars, the entire post-World Cup transfer market seizes up, which is exactly what happened after 2022 and is on pace to happen after 2026. The mega move that used to come in July or August has moved to July of 2 years later, based on club form. The World Cup, as a career-defining event for individuals, is losing its function. Not going away, but losing its function. There is a third reveal that ties this all together, and it lands with the most Brazilian image possible. A Brazil team, coached by an Italian, closing out a 3-0 lead against Haiti by sitting deep in a low block. That is block 8. And it is the moment the whole video reframes into a philosophical question, not a tactical one. Before we go there, one asks, if you have made it this far into a 40-minute analytical breakdown of a World Cup, you are the exact viewer this channel is built for. Hit subscribe. Is free, it is 1 click, and it tells YouTube to put the next video, which is going to be the same kind of deep dive on the knockout stage as it unfolds, in front of you the day it drops. There is going to be a lot to cover in the next 3 weeks. Come along for it. Pausa now on to Ancelotti, Brazil, and the death of the Samba. Here is the image the whole video has been building toward. Brazil, 3-0 up on Haiti at the 78th minute of a group stage match at the 2026 World Cup. Vinicius on the pitch. Rodrigo on the pitch. Rafinha subbed off but replaced by another Champions League regular. And with 15 minutes left in a match that is already won, Brazil does not push for the 4th. Brazil does not attempt to score for fun. Brazil does not entertain the neutral audience. Brazil drops into a mid-block and closes the match out with the cold professional discipline of a Diego Simeone side, protecting a 1-0 in a Champions League knockout tie. Alisson makes 2 saves at 3-0. There is no Samba. There is no Jogo Bonito. There is a Brazil coached by Carlo Ancelotti, the most European pragmatist alive, choosing to see the game out with 15 minutes of positional defensive work rather than risk an equalizer that was never coming. That is the third reveal, and it is the one that closes the argument. Because the deepest evidence of Era 3 is not that Cape Verde held Spain, or that Morocco outplayed Brazil for stretches, or that Japan came back from 2-0 down against the Netherlands. The deepest evidence is that even the team whose entire national identity was built around not doing this, the country that gave the world the phrase Jogo Bonito, the phrase the beautiful game, as a national marketing tool, has adopted the same defensive-first, control-oriented, low-risk closing patterns that every other elite team on Earth uses now. The system reached the team that was supposed to be immune to the system. This is not a criticism of Ancelotti. Ancelotti is doing his job. His job is to win a World Cup. And the correct decision, in game theory terms, when you are 3-0 up in the 78th minute against a technically limited opponent that is nonetheless coached in an Era 3 defensive block, is to close the match out with zero risk. That is what a Simeone would do. That is what a Guardiola would do. That is what a Nagelsmann would do. And that is now what a Brazil does. Which means the last cultural distinctiveness in international football, the idea that different nations play the game differently because their footballing DNA is different, has been absorbed into a single global operating system. Look at what the Brazilian starting 11 actually does with the ball now. They build up from the back, through a listen. Their center backs split wide. One fullback inverts into midfield. The pivot rotates between the 8 and the 6. The winger tucks into the half space to overload central areas. The 9 drops to link. Pausa. That is not the Brazil of 2002. That is a Manchester City model in yellow shirts. And every single starting midfielder in that Brazil squad has been coached inside that model at club level for the last 5 years, which is why they execute it so cleanly. It is also why the Brazilian public, watching at home, keeps saying they don't recognize the team. Because the team is not Brazilian anymore, in the tactical sense of a word. It is a European club team on international loan. The same shift is visible across every giant. Spain no longer plays tiki-taka. Spain plays a positional structure that is closer to what Bayern Munich runs than to what Xavi and Iniesta ran in 2010. Germany no longer presses in the coordinated high-line pattern of 2014. Germany plays a controlled mid-block with counter-triggers because that is what wins knockout matches in modern football. The Netherlands has abandoned the total football pretense entirely. France plays a Champions League model transition game. The stylistic diversity of international football, the reason people used to say Argentina plays this way, Italy plays that way, the Dutch play the other way, has collapsed into a small handful of variations on the same coaching manual. And that closes the loop on the framework. Era 1 gave us stylistic distinctiveness through geniuses raised in specific national football cultures. Era 2 gave us stylistic distinctiveness through coaches like Del Bosque, Lowe, and Bielsa, who built systems on top of national tactical traditions. Era 3 has erased both. Because the same tactical model that made Brazil competitive against Era 3 defenders is the tactical model that erases what Brazil used to be culturally. You cannot get one without paying the other. The price of catching up to what everyone else was doing was becoming what everyone else was doing. Now, and this is important, none of this means the Giants have gone soft or that the tournament is bad. England put 4 past Croatia on Sunday. France beat Senegal comfortably. Argentina cruised behind a vintage Messi. Portugal won by 3. Sweden hammered Tunisia 5-0. The big teams can absolutely still crush the small ones. What they can no longer do is frighten each other, and what they can no longer do is dominate a tournament in the way Brazil 2002 or Spain 2010 or Germany 2014 dominated theirs. The fear used to run top to top. Now it only runs top to bottom. And even the top to bottom margin has been squeezed. There is no more arrive at the tournament as the team the world already knows is winning it. That version of a World Cup is gone. So we have 3 reveals stacked. 1. The Giants are elite on the underlying data. 2. The tournament has lost its power to mint global stars because the compressed gap kills the stage moments that used to create them. 3. Even the most stylistically distinct footballing culture on Earth has adopted the same global tactical model because it is the only way to win now. 3 revelations. Same mechanism. Same era. The natural next question, and this is where the video's takeaway crystallizes into something you can carry with you into every match you watch from here, is what did football trade to get here? Not vaguely. Specifically. What went into the trade and what came out of it, and can we name the exchanges? Pausa, that is the taxonomy. And that is block 9. Every important shift in football history can be summarized by what the sport gave up to get it. The offside rule change of 1925 gave up defensive parity to buy more goals. The back pass rule of 1992 gave up goalkeeper time wasting to buy tempo. The introduction of VAR gave up flow to buy fairness on the big calls. Every rule change, every tactical revolution, every commercial shift comes with a trade. You gain something and you lose something, and you don't get to keep both. Era 3 is the biggest trade the sport has ever made without anybody voting on it. It was not legislated by FIFA. It was not designed by IFAB. It was not decided at a UEFA Congress. It happened because coaching education went global, tracking data got cheap, and the internet distributed tactical knowledge to every academy on Earth at zero marginal cost. And because it was not designed, nobody named the trades. That is what this channel is going to do right now. Because if you can name what the sport gave up, you can watch every match of this tournament with a completely different lens. You can predict which giants are going to struggle, which underdogs are going to hold, and which finals are going to be 0-0 instead of 4-2. Here is the framework. The 3 trades of Era 3. Numbered, named, portable. You will be able to apply this to every fixture in the knockout stage, and beyond that, to every major international tournament for the next decade until Era 4, whatever Era 4 turns out to be, starts to visibly form. Pausa Trade 1. Fear for fairness. The sport traded away the fear that used to define the top of the pyramid, and in return it bought fairness across the whole pyramid. In Era 1 and Era 2, when the group stage draw came out, half the fixtures on the sheet were pre-decided. You did not need to watch Brazil versus China in 2002. You did not need to watch Germany versus Ecuador in 2006. The outcome was already written. That predictability was the fear working exactly as designed. It was what being a giant actually meant. It meant the smaller nations were terrified of you before kickoff. Era 3 has liquidated that. The trade-off is that every fixture on the group stage sheet is now genuinely uncertain. Cape Verde really might hold Spain, and did, and that uncertainty is what the sport spent decades of coaching education investment to buy. You cannot have compressed uncertainty and fear at the same time. They are mathematically incompatible. The sport chose one. Trade 2. Icons for averages. The sport traded away its ability to produce global icons from tournaments, and in return it bought a much deeper base of technically competent professional footballers worldwide. In Era 1, football produced Pelé, Cruyff, and Maradona because a handful of national cultures raised players in unstructured, street football environments that generated creative individualism. In Era 2, football produced Xavi, Iniesta, and Muller because national systems built structured environments that generated tactical specialists. In Era 3, football produces Gakpo, Gvardiol, Kubo, El Canis, high-quality professional footballers, technically excellent, tactically educated, but interchangeable. The base of competent players is deeper than at any point in the sport's history. There has never been more good football played in more places by more people. But the trade-off is that the peak has flattened. The academy industrial complex that raises this generation of players is optimizing for baseline competence at scale, and baseline competence at scale is the enemy of the once-in-a-generation genius. You cannot have both. The sport chose the base. Trade 3. Culture for copy. This is the most painful one to name because it is the one the sport paid the highest price for. The sport traded away the stylistic distinctiveness of national football cultures, and in return it bought a global tactical baseline that every nation on Earth can reach. The Brazil that plays Jogo Bonito does not exist anymore because Jogo Bonito, executed against an Era 3 defensive block, loses to a coordinated European-style Brazil that wins boring 1-0s. The Netherlands of total football does not exist because total football, executed against modern pressing traps, gets counterattacked to death. The Italy of Catenaccio does not exist because Catenaccio, executed at international level, cannot generate enough attacking output to survive a modern tournament schedule. Every distinctive national tactical identity that made international football a cultural mosaic in the 20th century has been either abandoned or diluted because the giants who kept them lost more matches than the giants who copied the global model. Culture in football is expensive. Copy is cheap. The sport chose copy. Free trades. Fear for fairness. Icons for averages. Culture for copy. That is the taxonomy. That is the analytical tool this video hands you, and is the tool you can bring to every knockout tie from here on out. Because every match you watch in a round of 16 and beyond will be, underneath the noise, a specific working out of at least one of these 3 trades. Argentina versus a mid-tier African side? That is trade 1. A young forward you have never heard of scoring a winner? That is trade 2. France playing a boring 1-0 against Portugal in a semi-final? That is trade 3. In the next 2 blocks, we are going to apply each of the 3 trades to specific matches and specific players in this tournament, beat by beat, name by name, so you can see the framework working in real time. Because the whole point of a taxonomy is that it is not just a summary. It is a diagnostic tool. And once you can diagnose the trade, you can predict what the tournament is going to look like from here to the final. Pausa. Trade 1 applied starts now. Trade 1 applied. Fear for fairness. Look at the group stage draw you were handed at this tournament, and now look at it through the framework. Group B. Spain, drawn with Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and Cape Verde. In Era 1, that group is a 1-week formality. Spain wins all 3, scores 9 or 10, concedes 1 or 2. In Era 2, same story with more possession. In Era 3, Spain drew 0-0 with the least decorated team in the group, tied Uzbekistan on the underlying numbers, and had to grind out a 2-1 against Ukraine. Every single one of those results is Trade 1 working exactly as designed. Not one of them is Spain being bad. All of them are the compressed uncertainty of Era 3, replacing the pre-decided fear of the earlier eras. Take Group C, Brazil drawn with Morocco, Haiti, and Iran. Look at that on paper in 2010, and it is 3 walkovers and a 9-point run. Look at it in 2026, and it is a draw with Morocco, a controlled 3-0 against Haiti, and a genuine test coming against Iran on match day 3 that Brazil is favored to win, but nobody at the CBF is treating as a formality. The Iran side that will face Brazil has 6 starters based in Europe. Their coach came out of the Belgian coaching system. Their defensive shape in their opener against Norway was a 3-4-3 inverted structure with counter triggers that would not have looked out of place at Atlanta. Iran is not the Iran of 1998 or 2002 or 2010 or 2014. Iran is a fully modernized Era 3 national team, and Brazil is expected to beat them but is not expected to embarrass them. That expectation itself, the absence of the anticipated 3-0 rout, is Trade 1 live in front of you. Now take Group F, Argentina drawn with Chile, Nigeria, and a UEFA playoff qualifier. Argentina cruised behind Messi, yes. But look at the underlying numbers on Argentina versus Chile. Argentina won by 2 goals. Argentina generated roughly 1.5 expected goals. Chile generated 0.8. 20 years ago, Argentina versus Chile at a World Cup was a 4-goal margin waiting to happen. Now it is a well-managed 2-goal cushion in a game that stayed competitive until the 70th minute. Argentina is winning. Argentina is going to keep winning. But the shape of Argentina's wins is Trade 1 in miniature. Every giant closes every game out at a smaller margin than they used to, and the small margin closure is now the baseline expectation from every coaching staff at the tournament. Fear stopped delivering results. So the giants stopped selling fear and started selling professionalism. That is what Trade 1 looks like in the wild. Once you see it once, you cannot unsee it. Every knockout tie you watch from here will have this shape. Pausa. Trade 2 applied. Icons for averages. This one shows up in a place people are not looking, the Man of the Match award list. Go through the group stage of this tournament and look at who has been named Man of the Match across the first round of fixtures. You will find a lot of names. You will find good performances. You will find highlight reel moments. You will not find a single player about whom the football media consensus is this tournament made him a global icon. Not one. And the group stage of a World Cup is exactly where that used to happen. Ozil in 2010, James in 2014, Mbappe in 2018 during his group stage explosion, Enzo Fernandez in 2022. The mold used to produce 1 every cycle, sometimes 2. Look at the actual output of this tournament so far. Lamine Yamal, already famous, arrived a superstar, tournament confirming rather than creating. Bellingham, already famous, arrived a superstar, same story. Vinicius, already famous. Musiala, already famous. Foden, already famous. The tournament is not producing new stars. It is confirming the ones the club game already made. And the new names that are getting attention, Bilal El-Khanis, Ryan Cherki cameos, some interesting Uzbek midfielders, are getting 5% of the coverage a comparable player would have gotten in 2014. That is Trade 2. The base got deeper. El-Khanis at 19 is a technically better midfielder than most 19-year-olds at the 2010 World Cup were. But the base getting deeper means the top got flatter, and a flatter top means no one player breaks out of it inside a 30-day window anymore. The next Real Madrid or Barcelona superstar coming out of this tournament? There isn't one. There isn't going to be one. And when the January and summer transfer windows come around after this World Cup, the mega move that used to be the tournament's economic afterglow, €100 million signaling this player just became the face of the sport, is not going to happen. It didn't happen after 2022, and is not going to happen after 2026, and it is not going to happen after 2030 either. The tournament has lost that function. The trade was completed and cannot be reversed. You can watch this in real time in the transfer market rumors. Search the football press for post-tournament transfer speculation. What you'll find is speculation about players whose value is already set by their club form: Vinicius, Yamal, Bellingham, Musiala. What you will not find is a "who is the next James Rodriguez" thread that dominated the discourse in 2014 for 6 weeks after the final whistle. That thread does not exist anymore because the mechanism that produced James Rodriguez does not exist anymore. The compressed defensive gap kills the highlight reel goal. The absence of the highlight reel goal kills the transfer explosion. The absence of the transfer explosion kills the narrative arc that turns a good player into a global name. Trade 2 all the way down. 2 trades applied. 2 trades visible in the group stage of this specific World Cup right now, in matches you can rewatch tonight if you want to see them for yourself. The framework is not theoretical. It is diagnostic. And there's one more trade to apply, and it is the one that hurts the most because it does not show up in a match or a moment. It shows up in an entire missing culture. That is trade 3. That is block 11. Trade 3 applied. Culture for copy. And this one does not live in a match. It lives in absences. You have to notice what is missing to see it working. Start with the most obvious absence. Italy is not at this World Cup. A 4-time world champion, the country that won it in 1934, 1938, 1982, and 2006, is missing its 3rd World Cup in a row. Read that sentence twice. Italy has not played a World Cup match since 2014. 12 years. Longer than the entire span between Brazil 2002 and Germany 2014. And this is not a scheduling accident. Italy failed to qualify in 2018 to Sweden. Italy failed to qualify in 2022 to North Macedonia. Italy failed to qualify in 2026 to a UEFA playoff loss that this channel is not going to relive here because you already know how it ended. 4-time champions, absent for a full generation. Why does that matter as evidence for trade 3? Because Italy, more than any other football culture, was defined by catenaccio, a specific national tactical identity built around defensive organization, counter-attacking economy, and a particular kind of individual defender that Italian coaching produced. That identity beat the world in 1982. It beat the world in 2006. It was distinctive. It was recognizable at 10 yards. And then Era 3 arrived, and the specific kind of defender Italy raised, the libero, the ball-playing central defender, who commands a back four with tactical intelligence rather than raw pace, stopped being enough on his own, because Era 3 demanded that every position on the pitch execute both defensive discipline and possession phase build-up, and Italy's academies were still optimizing for one and half of the other. The Italian Federation could not simultaneously preserve catenaccio and modernize its build-up game inside the same generation. They chose to modernize. And they became worse at both because catenaccio-trained defenders can't play a modern build-up cleanly, and modern build-up defenders don't have catenaccio's positional intelligence in the box. The trade destroyed them. Trade 3, in its most complete form. Italy paid the highest price of any traditional football nation, and the price was 3 straight World Cups on the sofa. Move to the Netherlands. Total football is gone. The tactical philosophy that ran from the Ajax of the 70s through the Netherlands of Cruyff and the Barcelona of Guardiola, the idea that every outfield player is capable of playing every outfield role in the same match, has been quietly abandoned by the Dutch Federation. Watch the Netherlands play Japan on Sunday. That is not a total football team. That is a modern European hybrid running a 4-3-3 that could belong to any European nation from Belgium to Croatia. The rotations are gone. The libero in midfield concept is gone. The idea of a Dutch identity distinct from the rest of Europe is gone. What is left is a well-organized team that can be beaten by Japan from 2-0 up because it has no distinctive edge. The Netherlands did what Italy did, for years later, with less catastrophic results. They modernized, they became competitive, they lost their identity. Germany, the Klopp-Nagelsmann pressing tradition that produced the 2014 World Cup, was itself a distinctive German innovation, gegenpressing, at national level, built out of the coaching pipeline of Ralf Rangnick and translated to the Bundesliga. Watch Germany at this tournament. They do not press like that anymore. They play a controlled mid-block with counter-triggers because the counter-press of 2014 got copied across every top 15 national team on earth and lost its distinctiveness. So Germany moved on. But moving on meant abandoning the last authentically German tactical DNA that international football had. What is left is a Germany that can beat Curaçao 7-0 and can grind out a competitive draw against another top 8 side and cannot generate a signature style anyone would call German. The 2014 7-1 against Brazil? That match, played by the current German team, would be a 2-1 grind either way. Not because the players are worse. Because the tactical distinctiveness that produced a 7-1 has been traded for tactical portability. Brazil we covered in Block 8, but it belongs on this list. Jogo Bonito is not just a marketing phrase. It was a description of a specific attacking style built on individual technique and improvisation inside a loose collective structure. Ancelotti's Brazil is not that. Is not trying to be that. And when a Brazilian pundit criticizes the current Seleção for not looking like Brazil, what he is naming, without knowing, it is Trade 3. The identity that made Brazil the most watched national team on the planet for 6 decades has been traded for the tactical model that gives them the best chance of winning a modern World Cup. And the tragedy is, it might not even be enough. Because every other giant made the same trade at the same time, so nobody actually gained a competitive edge from it. Everybody paid the cultural cost. Nobody bought a proportional competitive gain. The market cleared, and every seller went home with less. The one interesting outlier is Argentina. Argentina still has a tactical fingerprint, and it exists because Messi exists. When Messi is on the pitch, Argentina plays around him, which forces a set of stylistic asymmetries. The number 8 always tucks in on the Messi side, the wide players stretch on the opposite flank, the pivot covers his defensive absence, that no other national team can reproduce because no other national team has Messi. Argentina is the last international team that plays a distinctive style, and it plays a distinctive style because of one 38-year-old. When Messi retires from international football after this tournament, Argentina joins the same global template as everyone else. The last stylistic holdout in the spore falls, and Trade 3 completes across every meaningful footballing nation on earth. That is the deepest absence in the tournament. Not a scoreline, not a bad performance. A missing catalog of national styles that used to make watching the World Cup feel like watching 12 different sports, not one. The compressed gap bought us fairness. The compressed gap emptied the icon factory. And the compressed gap ate the cultures that made international football different from club football in the first place. 3 trades, all working, all visible in this specific tournament, in specific matches and specific absences you can watch or notice tonight. The framework is complete. 2 honest conclusions sit inside the same set of facts, and this channel is not going to pretend one of them is right and the other is wrong, because both of them are supported by the evidence you just walked through. Conclusion 1. Football has never been healthier. The gap is gone. Any nation can beat any other on the night. The result of a group stage match is no longer written before kickoff. Cape Verde earned a point at their first ever World Cup. Morocco earned a point off Brazil on the balance of play. Japan came back from 2-0 down and controlled the second half of a match against a top 8 nation. Iran is no longer a formality. Uzbekistan is no longer a footnote. The rest of the world caught up to the giants because the sport put in decades of coaching education investment, data democratization, and global academy standards, and every single one of those investments paid off exactly the way they were supposed to. This is what the game grew actually looks like when it grows successfully. Anyone who tells you the modern World Cup is worse is telling you a story about aesthetics, not health. On the health metric, the sport has never been in a better place. Conclusion 2. Football traded its greatness for its fairness. It engineered away the possibility of a dominant national team, and it engineered away the pipeline that produced generational icons at the World Cup itself, and what is left is more even, more tactical, more predictable in the aggregate, and quietly less magical. Safer, smarter, grayer. The Brazil that walked through 2002 with Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and Ronaldinho in the same attack cannot exist in the modern sport because the modern sport does not let a team like that exist. The tactical infrastructure that would let another Brazil 2002 dominate a modern tournament has been given to every other nation for free over the last 20 years, and none of them are going to give it back. Both conclusions are true. Both are supported by exactly the same data. The tournament being watched right now is simultaneously the fairest World Cup ever staged and the least magical. Those two things are not in tension. They are the same fact viewed from two different sides. Pausa. Call back to the top of this video. Brazil 2002, Spain 2010, Germany 2014. Three sides that ruled a World Cup on a level no field could climb to. This channel opened 40 minutes ago by saying that team does not exist anymore. Now you know why. Not because those teams got worse. Because football evolved into a version of itself that structurally will not allow another one of them to be built. The mechanism was named. The trades were mapped. The evidence is in the group stage of this specific tournament, and it will be in the knockout stage, and it will be in every World Cup for the next 20 years, until Era 4, whatever it turns out to be, and it will come, starts to visibly form. This is not the same World Cup anymore. And the honest reckoning is that you cannot want it back without also giving up everything modern football gained getting here. There's no version of the deal where the Giants terrify the world again, and Cape Verde and Iran and Morocco stay 1-0 losses. Which leaves the question this video is never going to answer for you, because it is not this channel's question to answer. Has football become better, or has it lost its great national teams? Both are defensible. Neither is objectively correct. And the answer depends entirely on what you loved about watching this sport in the first place. Now the ask. If you made it this far, 3 things. 1. Hit the like button. If this framework changed how you look at the tournament, or gave you language for something you were feeling but couldn't name, that like is what tells YouTube to push this video to other football fans who are thinking the same thing. Takes 1 second. Massive help. 2. Subscribe and ring the bell. The knockout stage of this World Cup is coming. Every round is going to be a fresh test of the framework in this video, and this channel is going to break down the biggest matches with the same depth you got here. The bell makes sure you don't miss any of it, the round of 16 deep dives, the quarterfinal analyses, and the final piece that will absolutely be posted the morning after the trophy is lifted. 3. The comment section. This channel wants your take on 3 specific questions because your answers shape the videos coming next. Question 1. Of the 3 trades this video named, which one hurt the sport the most? Fear traded for fairness. Icons traded for averages. Culture traded for copy. Pick one and say why. Question 2. Would you personally rather watch Cape Verde hold Spain to a 0-0 at this World Cup or Spain winning 5-0 the way they would have in 2010? No hedging, pick one. Question 3. The hardest one. Do you believe a dominant national team on the Brazil 2002 or Spain 2010 level will ever exist again in your lifetime? Name the country you think could do it, if any, and explain the mechanism that would let them. Drop your take below. This channel reads them. The best answers are going to shape the next video in this series, which is going to look at the knockout stage through the framework you just learned. Pausa. Brazil 2002, Spain 2010, Germany 2014. That is what a great team used to look like. What is coming next in this tournament is going to look like something else entirely. And now, at least, you have the lens to see it clearly. Thanks for watching. See you in the round of 16.